Oneness is the answer, and its time is coming. Another day is here, and it's a time for healing. Look around the world and see our families dying. Doesn't seem to matter all the things we're trying. Another needle in the arm is just a message. Another day is coming, and it's time for healing.
Well, thank you all very much for your continued attention and your presence here. We'll start off round two by introducing a good friend of mine. Bill Masnick and I started working together back in 1988. I was a newly appointed police officer in the town of Orange. He was a brand new prosecutor in the district attorney's office who prosecuted all of our cases. And when we would lose a case, he'd get frustrated and he'd say, "Someday, Chris, I'm going to be a judge." And I said, "Bill, someday I'm going to be the sheriff." But we've been working together for many, many years in many different capacities. And he brings an incredible resume to his job here in the community. And what's the most wonderful about it is when someone who's born and raised in Franklin County practices law in Franklin County and now serves the county in the capacity of First Justice of our court. That's a home run for us and for him. Please join me in welcoming the Honorable William Masnick.
I've been asked to speak here, I think, because also I'm friends with John Merrigan. And I think he wanted me to quantify the problem we face. I sit in a rather unique seat as your judge in the district court here in Greenfield. I have the duty to deal with all the criminal cases and some of the civil cases that are touched by this epidemic that we face. I can tell you also about the history of this problem because I served as a prosecutor quite some time ago. And when I was a prosecutor, we may have had, in the 4 years I served, 2 cases that involved heroin. And they weren't young people. And as a defense attorney, maybe a couple more. In the past 5 years, as the first justice here in Greenfield, I've seen this problem overtake our community. It started as a leaky faucet, and now it's become a tsunami. It has come on very fast, faster than we were prepared to deal with it. I think that I'm going to try to give you an idea of what the addicted population looks like, because we're talking about this problem in terms of the resources that we need to deal with it, and what we're not talking about is who it is. Some of you are here because you have family members that are involved. Some of you have lost family members. What I'm seeing in the district court, and I want you to understand the district court's jurisdiction only begins at the age of 18, so I'm not dealing with people under the age of 18. But the population that we're seeing is very young, and it continues to get younger every day. So that I deal not just with criminal defendants that are before the court because they've been involved with law enforcement, been arrested for possession of heroin or something else, and sometimes it's not possession of heroin, it's for larcenies or robberies. And the addiction is part of the underlying problem. But I also deal with civil commitments. And for some of you who don't know, a civil commitment in the district court under Section 35 of Chapter 123 involves a family member usually, but it can also involve a probation officer or a police officer requesting that the person be committed as an addict, a person who abuses substances, or as an addict who has lost control of the problem of their addiction and is a danger, a significant danger to themselves or others. Now this population, when I began as a judge 5 years ago, perhaps 1 or 2 a month, always alcohol, usually alcohol. And now the problem is 1, 2, sometimes 3 per day, and almost exclusively heroin. That's your problem. And the age, just to give you an idea, is not 30, 35. It's 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. And I want to give you some more information, and that is that the process of a civil commitment involves the court hearing evidence in the form of testimony, usually of family members, and also an opinion from a doctor who's examined the person brought before the court. And so I also have the benefit of understanding some of the history of that person's addiction. And so I'm going to give you this other piece of information. That is that consistently now I'm hearing from family members, a mother, father, sister, brother, about this person's addiction process beginning 2 and 3 years earlier. Now, the reason I'm giving you that is because if you do the math, you realize this addiction process in many cases is beginning when they're still in high school. And so in terms of addressing the problem as we move forward, one of the things that I think we need to address is education. And this education process should focus, in my opinion, on a much younger population than we think. It needs to start very, very early. Because where is this addiction process starting? Is it really starting when they're 17 years old? Or is the groundwork for that being actually begun when they're much younger than that and they come in contact with alcohol? We now know that the juvenile brain is vulnerable to becoming susceptible to addiction because of its exposure to alcohol at a younger age. So we need to be thinking about this problem a whole different way, which isn't just about teaching parents and children about the dangers of heroin, but also about the dangers of early exposure to alcohol. And I say that because it is heartbreaking to me to sit consistently day after day and see 18, 19-year-olds brought in on a warrant of apprehension because a parent has just discovered that their child is an addict. That brings me to another point, and that is that the education needs to not just focus on the young person, but also the parents. Because I can't tell you how many times I've taken testimony from parents who've brought their 18, 19, 20-year-old child before the court on a commitment petition and testified in tears at the exasperation of having just discovered something that began in their household 2 years, 3 years earlier. They had no idea. They didn't know what the signs were. No one told them. Where was the information? And I can't tell them because it's not there. And so I think the education process needs to include parents as well. Now, I want to echo some of the thoughts that were expressed earlier about this particular disease and its socioeconomics. It doesn't really know any socioeconomics. It is happening to wealthy families, to poor families. It's happening to well-educated families, to not so well-educated. It doesn't know any boundaries. It's just there. It's ever present. It's all around us. Now, this is the nature of our problem. We can't just look to the state for answers. We're the solution. And though the size of this crowd gives me some idea of the nature of the problem, I already knew it. And the size of this crowd also tells me we have the wherewithal to solve this problem. Because of all of you being here, that tells me we're heading in the right direction. And I say that because we're ahead of the curve in some ways, even if we're behind it in others. We do have a drug court. We do have a sheriff who's proactive about substance abuse, understands it. We do have chief probation officers that work diligently and understand the nature of addiction, and they're there to help. I think we also have in John Merrigan a champion. I've never seen a problem that he has confronted that he hasn't beaten. So we're in good shape in those regards. We also have a wonderful congressional delegation led by Senator Rosenberg, and so I'm confident we have the resources to deal with this problem. But we need to think about it not just in terms of treatment for those that are already addicted. We need to really think long and hard about what is the point of education, what is the point where we can make the most difference in people's lives. with not just the parents, but the children as well. And we need to focus on that. I think it's something that the legislature needs to look at. The school superintendents need to look at it. The principals of our schools need to look at it, because it's the elephant in the room. If we don't start there, we haven't got a chance at prevention. That's how I see the nature of the problem from where I sit, and I share your concern, but I also share in the hope that this large crowd gives us. Thank you.
Before I introduce the panel, I noticed that Representative Kulik came in like 2 seconds after I mentioned his name. So, Representative Kulik, thank you for coming. So one of the ways that we can do our job more effectively, better as a community, is to learn from other communities. And certainly the folks in Woburn and the programs in South Boston have things to teach us. We have things to learn from them. To talk about the HEAT program, there are 3 gentlemen from Woburn who I'll introduce, and then we'll learn a little bit more about the Gavin Foundation in South Boston. Here to talk about the HEAT program, which is Heroin Education Awareness Task Force, is Vincent Pirro, Michael Higgins, and we'll start with the Chief of the Woburn Police Department, Chief Bob Ferrillo. Chief.
Thank you. This isn't really my thing. I like to stay behind the scenes, but I'd just like to talk about 3 different words that drove us to where we are. Collaboration, communication, and cooperation. 8 years ago, I was a junior sergeant sitting down in the training office at the police station. They said, hey, go over to the court, something about heroin. And here I stand 8 years later that we came together and we worked on the problem. If I could just take 2 or 3 minutes to run through the words. As collaboration, I cannot arrest my way out of this heroin problem. No matter how hard I try with these, we're not going to solve a single thing with handcuffs. It's a public health issue, and every interaction with the police department doesn't need to end up with somebody going to jail. I need to deliver that message to the parents so that when they find the heroin in the room, they have somebody to call. I'm open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, Christmas, Easter, and New Year's included. Call us. We'll come help. We don't need to arrest somebody for possession of heroin. We need to build a team together, and we do that. We're very fortunate in Woburn and the 7 communities that go into the Woburn District Court. We communicate daily with probation. We communicate with Judge Henkel. I talk to her quarterly. Kathy McEwen, who's our clerk of courts. That's from the judicial system. But where else do you need to deal with? Schools. We have a community-based justice program. Every single guidance counselor in the entire school department has my cell phone number. We do a very similar program in Woburn in June, the HEAT conference. This will be our ninth one coming up. And when I stand and talk at that, I just put my cell phone number, my name and my cell phone number behind me. I'm committed to what we do. Collaborate with the education, the school department, the guidance counselors. Treatment, Winchester Emergency Room, Leahy Clinic, any other alternative treatment that they have. Give them my phone number. Call us. We'll work together. To work with the community, when the parents come in and they want to talk, it's a big hush-hush thing. And some so prominent families in Woburn have come to us in tears saying they stole their college fund, they stole this, they spent it, to try to break through the stigma. And I do it in a rather unconventional way. In my desk, I have 2 stacks of cards. One's to a treatment facility that we're interacted with, and one's to a funeral home. And the funeral home knows I do it, and I'll give the cards to both of them, and I'll say, he can't solve this yourself. You need help. Call this treatment facility, or if you don't want to do that, call David Delarusso at Delarusso's Funeral Home. One of them you're going to call within the next year or 2 if you don't get help. Everybody gets upset at me, but let's drive it home. There's the elephant in the room, like the previous speaker just said. Let's take it on. I'll help them. I'll walk the path with them. I'll go to Vinnie Pirro and Mike Higgins, and we'll do it together. But that's the reality of it all. Bring in as many people as we can. Whatever confidentiality we need to address, I go to community-based justice meetings, and they sit there, and they'll hold their papers, and they'll say, well, we have a 16-year-old student that did this, 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 and this. Well, who is it, and can I help? Well, confidentiality rules say this, that, the other thing. I'll be the elephant in the room then, and I'll say, be confidential or whatever. We'll call the kid and tell them the kid's dead if they don't deal with it. And I'm the obnoxious person that can retire tomorrow if I want to, so I can say whatever I need to say. Okay. Communication. Whatever anybody wants to say, I wore my uniform today because I'm Vinny's driver. I look better driver like this. talk to anybody. We communicate with parents, with families. You want me to come back tomorrow and talk to somebody else? I'll drive out here, 2 hours, I can do it. My uncle used to live in Brattleboro, we're just a stone's throw away. We'll communicate with anybody. Vinny and Mike do this 2 or 3 times a month. They go to different areas and they talk, different groups, different community groups. Within the last 7 weeks now, we've had about 20 overdoses in Woburn alone, just not the region, in Woburn. 8 of those resulted in fatalities. So we've had 8 deaths since January 1st in the city of Woburn. If you look at the death certificate, it says respiratory arrest, it says cardiac arrest, it says whatever. Well, the needles in their arm was a good hook when we found them, that there was heroin involved. It's vicious. We didn't have all that much last year. Does anybody want to stand out and say Woburn has a heroin problem? The mayor would kill me if he knew I was standing here saying this. But at the end of the day, it's a regional problem. It's affecting Woburn, and we're going at it. Communicate with whoever wants to listen. And the other thing is cooperation. I'm a cop. I have handcuffs. That's the career I chose. I went to law school. My wife thought I'd retire and go work with her in her firm. No, didn't work. And so, cooperate with the people that we have. I have 100 police officers, more or less 96 that work for me, and we're social workers that carry guns. I tell these guys that heroin doesn't need to end up in handcuffs, substance abuse doesn't need to end up in handcuffs. You need to help these people get treatment. You send somebody out of the police academy, all full of themselves, they get their handcuffs, their shiny boots. We put them on the desk to answer the phone for 2 years, and we ruin them right off the bat. But that'll slow them down. That'll teach them where it's at. But to work to cooperate. As I told a few people today, I've been at this for 34 years, and I still like going to work in the morning. The day that I stop liking going to work, I'll just stay home that day and turn my gun in, have somebody come pick up my gun. But I love what I do. I'm committed to juveniles. I'm committed to the adolescent substance abuse treatment. I've been blessed to meet Hillary Jacobs, who I've worked with over the last 6 months, 9 months. Vinny and Michael have known us sooner, but we'll cooperate with anybody. We'll come back out here. We'll do anything that you need to do. We'd love to have anybody here that wants to come out to our program in June to join us. And that being said, I'll turn this over to Vinny, who is the real, Michael, and he'll turn it over to Vinny, who's the real spokesman. Thanks for having us. I appreciate being here.
Hi, my name's Mike Higgins. I'm a probation officer in the Woburn District Court. I have no title. I'm just a line PO with 34 years of experience. In saying that, in 2005, sitting at my desk wondering what the hell is going on in this area, we had an influx of young girls, 17 to 18, 19-year-old girls coming into the Woburn District Court, which is a suburban court, which handles Woburn, Winchester, Reading, North Reading, Burlington, and Stoneham, 93 and 95, basically. So we're considered a suburban court. So we saw this influx of young girls coming in here for opiate-related offenses, and we said, what's going on? We didn't know. We didn't know as probation officers. We didn't know as a community. So we started asking questions, and we started seeing some overdoses. But the questions we found out after getting together was that these girls had older boyfriends, that those girls experienced some perks, went from there, went up the progression. The progression is this. Everybody knows what a 5 milligram perk is. Probably everybody in this room has probably tried one once. Don't just, maybe, maybe not. But those are the ones that get prescribed to you. All the kids do it. Next thing you know, they progress into the Oxycontins. During that time frame, we all know about the story with the Oxys, the 80 milligrams. They talked about Purdue Pharma making them foolproof, but they were just crushing them, and then when they put the seals on them, they cook them in the microwave. Well, they go from getting that 5 milligram high to an 80 milligram high. It's over 12 of them at once. So they start snorting and get the instant high. Society got together and did something about it. The pharmacies wouldn't do paper prescriptions anymore. They were checking. The DEA stepped in. Everybody stepped in as a group and sort of put a nix to it. That worked pretty good. Then all these people that were doing this realized that, like Woburn, for instance, Woburn is 20 minutes from Lawrence, 20 minutes from Lowell, 20 minutes from Boston, 20 minutes from Lynn. Within a 20-minute drive, you can get what you want. And they were getting heroin, and they were snorting it. Instead of spending $80, they were spending $10, sometimes $4 back then. And they were getting high in the heroin by snorting it. Well, if you know anything about this, after about 30, 35 days, you don't get high anymore from snorting heroin. Next thing you know, the needle's in their arm. And when the needle goes in the arm, that's when you got to deal with it. So these girls, that's what was taking place. So more importantly, they come in, the judge spoke about Section 35s, which I'm glad you did, because that's the tool that we all should learn to use. But these girls started coming in, and we were Section 35 in them. But they were going to Framingham because there was only 6 beds in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts in 2005 for Section 35s for female. There were 300 for males in Bridgewater, but there were only 6 down at High Point. Well, something had to change, so what we said was we got to get together. So we got together with a representative from every police department in our community, and we didn't want any of the phonyism. We just wanted to get to the results, get to what we got to get to. And we put ourselves together. We realized everybody had the issue. The chiefs gave us a guy, and they knew in each one of their communities that they had a heroin problem. We still do, but they had a heroin problem. So all the chiefs of police were willing to cooperate with us to get someone to the table. So we got to the table. Then when we got to the table, we started harassing the crap out of our senators and representatives. But what we did find was the path of what was happening. So we figured that one avenue we'd have to go after is education. At that time, there was a series of overdoses. Thus is probably why we're all here today. You're having a series of overdoses and fatal overdoses. For years, you might have had overdoses and didn't realize it. So with the fatal overdoses coming, we all got together. We presented our situation to our state reps. Basically, we went in one of the courtrooms, fed them orange juice and Danish, and gave our presentation to them. Well, it worked, because every one of those reps or senators in our area had someone with an issue that you guys are facing right now. So when we did that, we all got together. There's one person that I got to mention that no one has mentioned today about helping out, and I'm sure Senator Rosenberg knows who he is. It's Senator Steve Tolman, who's retired and gone into the private sector. If anybody knows Steve Tolman, he's a representative from the Watertown area. He was diligent in getting to everywhere you could today for money and finances. We lost that guy, so we have to find another one like that. Hopefully that's Senator Rosenberg, okay? I don't know if he's still here. But we have this issue, we had it, we brought it to them, and then they funded us the first time. They funded us because of the issues, but we would not step on the pavement. We didn't want to take credit for anything till we come up with an educational package, because we feel education is the biggest component to this. Addiction, you can get treatment. Well, you got to educate before it gets there. And if you see in there, you have a pamphlet, Vinny, at all? I don't have any pamphlets. The blue pamphlets are in one of those folders. If we had enough, yeah, that one, ma'am. You look at that, the signs of heroin use. Just a simple thing like spoons missing, cotton in the room, long sleeves in the summer. Read down, oh, here they are. You can look at that. That's what we were seeing. This is from us interviewing our people. So when we started seeing all this, we could start doing something about it. But we go and talk to parents, because there's where the problem lies. There's one thing we all know about heroin addicts, if you know about them, they are liars. Flat and simple. They can talk you out of anything, and it happens all the time. So what we felt in our community was the parents weren't educated. They don't see these little signs, like Judge had talked about that a little. So we went out to every kind of community service situation, every club, every organization, because face it, the businesses in those times, and I'm sure that's the same as going out here. You build a house, the copper's gone before you finish it, you know. There's ways. These people are smart. They know how to find money. They just don't take the checkbook in the end. They take it from the middle. And we've had people walk to our door with over $100,000 stolen from them, from their son being a heroin addict, and having a shame factor to prevent them from coming from treatment. And I believe that's the most important thing we can talk about here today, is the shame factor. Tough. Your kid's on heroin, let's get treatment. Who cares what your aunt, your sister, or the kid down the street says, or the school says? Who cares? Because you've got to take action when you can. When you wait too long, you go to wakes and funerals, and that's what takes place. Vinny and I have been to many, many. So I say to the parents, if you think your kid's lying, they are lying. They are. Let's be honest. So that's what happens, and there's a shame factor involved, and you've got to get over that shame factor. That person has to be able to be willing to speak to somebody in the community, or your task force here. Just each community that's involved in this task force should assign someone to go to answer some of these questions. And if you do that, you localize it enough and you get more people involved like that. But that works, because when they come to the courthouse, like Vinny says, when they come, it's too late. It's too late. But fortunately, we can do something about it. We try to do something. Vinny's going to get involved in that. But I say, you know, don't second guess yourself. You're smart. We're parents. We've raised our kids. Stick to it. So And I just want to leave on one other thing. There are 100 beds now, at WOTC in New Bedford for girls. 100 beds, because when there was the 6 beds, those girls that were going for Section 35s had to go to Framingham, had to go to the prison, stay in there. We had like 40, 50 people a day in Framingham prison for heroin. And how's that work out? So now there are 100 beds. But I'll tell you this much, there's 18 people in Framingham too, because the beds are full every single day. There are 300 between Bridgewater and Matsy. But there is treatment out there, and I just want to the educational part's the most important component, because that stops it before it happens. Once it happens, yeah, there's ways to help out. There certainly is. You got to work for them. But the education is important, and you're the ones that are responsible to give it. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name's Vinny Piero. I'm the Chief Probation Officer at Woburn District Court and one of the coordinators with Mike from the HEAT program. After hearing from the professional panel today speaking, I really have nothing left to say. We're fortunate enough to have a program that we've been involved with for over 8 years, and everything's been outlined by Mike. It's unfortunate that we have to have a program such as we do. We've on record saved, we've treated over 2,000 kids. We've educated probably in the 5,000 range. And we're still back to square one today, 8 years later, which is discouraging, but today is a true testament to a community that, from what I'm hearing from people speaking in the lobby, between breaks, before and after, that this is an educated group. And this is the first step in the process of getting an answer to some degree. As Hillary Jacobs said, there's no recipe. We don't have the answers. I told John Merrigan, quick story on John Merrigan. At our HEAT conference last year, he grabbed me in the lobby, and he just introduced himself and said, we're having a real problem up here in Franklin County, and, I'd like to, bend your ear someday. Boy, was that an understatement. Mike and I always say, we're kind of rough around the edges. We're probation officers first and foremost. We're not treatment professionals. We're parents. We're brothers and sisters. We're passionate about what we do. We love what we do, and we try to make a difference every day of our job. That's why we get into the line of probation. But John Merrigan, calling me and Mike relentless, he puts that to another step in the phase. He's a pit bull. I thank him for having us today, and the community is very fortunate, as many of the other guest speakers have said today. But I'd like to give another round of applause, John Merrigan. I'd also like to acknowledge the community at large, between Judge Massanek and Senator Rosenberg and all the other panel speakers, that just getting the word out there. Communication is the biggest thing that we think. I think the education in the community leads to prevention and leads to the options in play. Every kid's different. There's a million type of treatment. There's stabilization, there's transition. I can get into some of those. Long-term residential. Sometimes an intensive outpatient works. We don't know what's going to work. An addict will tell you, every day is different. They think up, they're sick. And I'm thrilled to hear Governor Patrick talking about that, addiction is a sickness. Senator Tolman's great. He says their brain is sick. It's sick for a long, long time. How do we fix that? What do we do? I think as a community, you provide options. You defend yourself by knowing what they might be. You're never going to be a step ahead, but let's just try to be one step behind. It's not scientific. It's common sense. That's what we do. I told John, we're a very simple program, but we're a program. We answer calls. We screen. We sometimes handle the Section 35s in our court. It's technically not our job. But what we do is we get involved with the families. They come. We get calls. I've serviced probably, I think in the last probably 5 or 6 years, Probation Officer John Jones came to one of our HEAT conferences, and he called me up. And I think since then, since we opened up that, that friendship, partnership, professionalist, we've served over 10 to 15 kids from Franklin County. And that speaks volumes that a family member is willing to drive a kid 2 hours in their own vehicle. And I know transportation's tough up here. You have your own little, hardships and barriers that you need to break through. But to put a kid in a car for 2 hours and drive him down and hoping that he stays for that 3 to 7 days. What are we going to do with him after 3 to 7 days? Post-detox is crucial. That's where we saw a lot of our overdoses. They get into the detox program. Once again, educated group, you probably realize this, but they've eaten, they've put on some weight, They haven't used drugs in that period of time. They've flushed out the toxins out of their bodies. They are at their most vulnerable stage in their addicted life. They get out, their brain's still sick. They're still craving the drugs. We're seeing these high influx purity of heroin, pure in the 90s. Then we start adding in this fentanyl, which is basically a high morphine painkiller. They're adding in ketamine, K2, it's a cat tranquilizer. Who in a million years, and we're dealing with some families from Winchester that both parents are doctors. Their kid was a 3-star scholarship athlete to college, gets a knee injury. Who in a million years thought that great, that student A scholarship stud on the football field would have an injury and within 3 months gets cut off on the perks or the oxys from the doctor, and he's shooting up heroin in a $5 million house. And where's he found? Dead in a $5 million house. That's what we're dealing with. We can't predict what's going to happen with these young kids. I can tell you, and Commissioner, this isn't getting kudos, but Commissioner Dolan's here. We've been having our conference for over 8 years. Today, once again, is a true testament of people responding to a community challenge. The Commissioner of Probation, we have a lot of programs in place. We're trying to get to the root of the problem. It isn't just come in, do well while you're on probation. Let's try to fix what's wrong and get you moving in the right direction. It's all about kind of enhancing and figuring out what's going on. There's a lot of different personalities in the treatment field, in the probation field, some judge. You're lucky to have a judge such as you do. I have a great judge in my court as well, and we're working towards finding some type of answer that we can put them in the right position to succeed. How long is that going to be? We don't know. Relapse is somewhat inevitable. After a period of time, for some reason, once again, we don't know why, they relapse. We had one girl relapse twice in one day. I should say overdose twice in one day, and Hillary mentioned Narcan. I think it's a great tool for parents to get. You get certified in a quick period of time, 10, 15 minutes. You can keep it in your home. Obviously, you get certified, you'll learn about it more. But it's a great tool to have for a parent because, we've heard stories. Some of our best speakers at our HEAT conferences have been parents that have lost their loved ones. And they speak from the heart, and that's what it comes down to. This community has a lot of heart. You're here today. What are we going to do? You're going to keep talking about it. You're going to keep communicating. You're going to drive your state senators and representative. You're going to drive them absolutely crazy. You're going to knock on doors. If you have to get petitions going. This is what John Merrigan's done to get everybody here today. And that is what is the most important thing out of anything we can talk about. You're going to hear from John McGann. We have a great relationship to our HEAT program. You got some great probation being done at Greenfield. You got a brand new chief in Tony DeAngelis. She's in it. She's in it for the long run. We got a lot of good people working at community-based programs. Come to the courthouse, ask questions. If we don't have the answer, and I don't have a lot of answers, we'll push you in the right direction. We'll try to respond to you. But it's a start, and that's the biggest thing. Mike talks about denial. Where are we going from here? I don't know. We think outside the box with our HEAT program, too. We have a lot of programs. We're having a Narcan event, non-probation related, Commissioner. Having a Narcan event. We are having, we do a prescription take-back day twice a year through our local police departments. When we started doing these programs, there were no kiosks in the police stations. Everybody's on the same page. We see it. But we didn't want to just educate. We also went and we get some assistance from BSAS. Hillary Jacobs has been great. We have some detox. We have some stabilization long-term. The longer they're in treatment, the better. That's a recipe that we all would agree works the best. There are some great step-down services after. Obviously, a lot of it revolves around insurance and the money, and there's a lot of barriers in place. But if you keep going at it, you're going to break through those barriers eventually. A program that we spoke at Woburn High, I think it was last week, and for the first time, we've gone to panel discussions for years, and there's usually 40 to 50 parents in the audience. And usually those parents are the ones that don't need to be there, okay? That happens all the time. We had 240 people at this conference, and it was put together within 4 days. That's how drastic it's getting. These kids, they don't know how to get back. They don't know how to get back to where they were. And a gentleman walked up to me, and I'm a Somerville kid, and so I'm in a city, and Woburn at first, I'm like, Woburn, what's going on up there? Like, I grew up in Somerville, Medford, and a little more of a city kid, and then I came to Woburn, and it's just as bad in Woburn. As Mike said, we're 20 minutes from all the drug havens. And now with the internet and the prescription drugs, so we educate parents, clean out your medicine chest. As the doctor said, if you're not using it, get rid of it. Get rid of it. We can go on to the crime correlations and how these kids, They know. They're smart. They're desperate. They will do whatever they need to do to get that drug. They will rob you blind before you know it. Keep your eyes open. Mike says, be a parent. Be aware of the signals. The friends they're hanging around with. Very simple stuff. A parent wants to deny it, deny it. Don't. Be on top of that. Back to the story. A gentleman walked up to me after the presentation. He owns a very well-known funeral home in the Somerville area. And he said, you know, Vinny, I get an idea. He said, what I'd like to do is I'd like to have almost like a, we'd call it years ago like a Scared Straight. We'd bring a kid through the House of Correction. He said, I'd like to start like a program where you can get an addict and bring him through the funeral home, and we can show him the process of what's going to happen when he dies. That, you know, I used to hand out toe tags in my office. I know it's a little unconventional, but I'd say, if you don't want the help, we're here. A HEAT program's here to service you. If you don't want to take advantage of this, take the toe tag. I'll put my number on it for you. You can either call me or wrap it around your toe, because you're either going to be dead or in treatment. That's the way. There's not many options when they get to that level. And once again, now, the ODs, the fatals, it's getting out of hand, and it's very discouraging once again that we've done exactly what John Merrigan in this, I wish he came up with a better name. He kind of repeated the same program as us. He just added opioid. I mean, you're talking about being creative, thinking outside the box. I mean, you could have got a little something better than that. But we're in a position that, you know, we would be, you know, I would be honored if it went to fruition. We had a similar program out in Franklin County, because there's an obvious need for it. The community, once again, community-based stuff, it's not scientific. You're an answer to some people. You're definitely going to save a life. Judge Carey, I love the starfish story, because when we began this program, we said, if I can save a life, that's worth it right there. And I know that the HEAT program has saved many lives. We're going to continue to try to save as many as we can. And you're not going to be able to reach them all. You know, that's life. That's life. You're gonna do your best. And I know when I go home at the end of the day, you know, if my cell phone's not ringing, my wife's still okay with that, it's a good day. I leave that office, I know I did the best I could every day, and that's what probation officers do every day. That's what police departments and treatment providers do. That's what we're here. We're a community facing community challenges, and hopefully there's a better resolution and we have better news to report year down the road. So thank you for coming today. I appreciate your time, and I'm going to hand it over to John McGann.
So thank you for having me here to speak today and to share a little bit about what went on in South Boston. So it's kind of like we came full circle as the doctor spoke about practicing in South Boston at the Boston Medical Center. And I've heard a lot of things today, and I don't want to repeat a lot of information that you've already heard, but I do want to highlight some of the things that people have touched on. 12.3% of 12 to 17-year-olds in Massachusetts have used illicit drugs. Almost 8% report alcohol dependence or abuse. And somebody had touched on, many people have touched on, they don't start with heroin. There's no kid that woke up and said, I want to do heroin. I guess I'll back up just a half a step if I could. Part of what Gavin Foundation runs is we run adolescent programs as well as adult programs. So I've had a lot of experience over the last 15 years treating adolescents. We've probably done over 1,000 intakes. And I've yet to have a kid come in and say that heroin was their first drug. It all starts with alcohol and marijuana. So if you're sitting in this room and you're thinking, well, my kid's only drinking or only smoking weed, I'm all set. You're not all set. And I'm not here to say that every kid that's drinking and smoking weed is going to grow up to be a heroin addict or an opiate addict. But I'm telling you that every kid that we treat that's got an opiate addiction and a heroin addiction started with alcohol and marijuana. It's part of the questions that we have to ask on the intake. Age of first use, and what that substance was, and how they used it. So we've done thousands of them. And so when speakers up here talk about getting into the schools and doing things, those are the things that we need to do so that you don't get to the pills, you don't get to the heroin. You got to intercede early and often. And some examples of some things that we've done in South Boston is with the sports teams. We split up the parents and we split up the youth, and we do an educational program. You attend the educational program, then you get your uniform, and then you can play the sport. That's just an example of how we're forcing the information into the parents as well as the kids. So you come to the groups that we put on, you get a little chit, and then the coach will give you the stuff. So that's one way that we can get some information into both parties. We also have a program that goes into schools, CCD classes, art programs, wherever we can get to the youth. That's what we do. We go in, we teach about refusal skills, offering replacement activities, setting goals, and how to reward themselves when they achieve those goals. And it's very important. And we go in as young as 4th and 5th grade to start to plant those seeds. So education is a big part, and that's something that we heard about today. We also know that we heard about the prescription drop-off boxes in the police stations, and those are effective, we know, to getting things off the street. But one of the things that we do in South Boston is we have cards made up, and we give them to the pharmacies to put in the bag, and it's informational cards, so that when Grandma goes and does pick up her prescription, that there's an informational card in there on telling her that these are abusable, and that when she is done with them, to get rid of them, because a lot of people won't know about a drop-off box. So that's one way to get it into every house, is to flyer them off and ask the pharmacies to just put them back in. They have a responsibility to the community, and so that's our expectation of them as a treatment provider in the community. Another thing is outreach workers, people that maybe have been in recovery. I know you get the Recovery Project up here, and they do great work. Those people can go out into the community and reach out to some of these young people. They know where which parks the kids are drinking and using substances. Go right out after them. They're not going to come to you. You got to go right out and grab them. So that's another tactic. These community forums are something, unfortunately, 15, 17 years ago was where in South Boston we had several of these, one right after the other. And I know the politicians are getting picked on here because everybody's saying go to them for funding, but that's how we started 17 years ago before we opened Cushing House, and the community just kept the pressure on. He's now Congressman Lynch. They wouldn't take the pressure off until he succeeded in getting a program for adolescents. So the pressure to the politicians will work. To go along with the early interventions that we talked about, there's the prevention portion of it, but then there's also several interventions that, evidence-based practices, best practices that can be used with youngsters when they get caught with alcohol or marijuana. It doesn't have to go all the way to Vinnie and the guys in the probation department. There could be things set up that work directly with the police department and the community service offices to set up some sort of diversionary program where if youngsters get caught with alcohol, marijuana, doing petty crimes that stem from that you could do some sort of intervention and educational work with them that would keep them out of the court system, but then would identify them. And we know that this is a disease of denial. And so, I know firsthand that little Johnny didn't do it. He was in the wrong place at the wrong time. I hear that story all the time from the parents. But if everybody stays the course, he might be in the wrong place the wrong time the first time, maybe the second time, but not the third time. And if we stay the course, we're breaking through not only the adolescents' denial, but their families' denial and community denial at large. So I think that that's a worthwhile tool that the community can use to, again, intercede before they get to the pills and the heroin. And everybody will think, you're picking on the kids. They're just having a few beers down the park or down at the river. That's where it starts. And I'm going to keep, and I always go back to that because we don't want them on the pills and we don't want them on the heroin. We talked about the Narcan training, and those are something that Hillary spoke about through Learn to Cope and other places where you can get trained. And anybody that knows somebody who's using opiate, who won't accept treatment, won't stay in treatment, needs to have that readily available to them. So you need to reach out to the local providers and see how you can get some of that to put in your home or in your car. And along that, I also want to talk about, just touch on briefly, that there's many pathways to treatment. There's 12-step self-help programs, there's medicated assisted treatment, there's outpatient treatment. there's intense outpatient treatment, there's many different pathways to treatment, and we don't know which one's going to work for who. So as long as they're in some form of treatment, it's better than no treatment. And I think that it's important to keep that in mind, because people would get fixated on this is what I think they want or this is what they want. You have to be willing to explore all the possibilities for that individual and encourage them along the way to participate in whatever level of treatment they can participate in, and then move them to the next level, a more intense level, if they don't succeed at that level. And I know that relapse doesn't have to be part of it, but unfortunately it is in many cases. And so I think it's important to not look down on the person that relapsed, to understand that it's part of the disease. We've heard the word disease many times, public health issue. And so I think it's just important to note that the National Institute of Drug has done a study, and the study comes up that people with drug addiction relapse 40 to 60% of the time. But asthma is 50 to 70%. Hypertension, 50 to 70%. Type 1 diabetes, 30 to 50%. And so I point this out because you wouldn't look down at a diabetic that ate a candy bar. You know, so it's along the same lines, and I know that people, some people don't agree with that, but it's a disease. That's why we're asking the insurance companies to step up to the plate and pay for this, because it is a disease, it is a public health issue as well as a public safety issue. But we can't look down at people because they relapse. And we've heard a lot today about the fatal overdoses, about relapse, about people being involved in the criminal justice system. And I typically don't break my own anonymity, but I want to today because I want people to know that there's hope. I'm 22 years clean. Thank you. I share that today only because it's important to know that it's a process. And I wasn't the first time, the second time, not even the third time, but eventually I got it and I've been able to hang on to it. So there is hope. So don't give up on your loved ones. Don't give up on treatment. You know, it's not that the treatment provider wasn't good. People are going to get it over time. Some people are going to get it over time. And so please continue to work with them. Don't turn your back on them. The last thing is, people talked about the families needing help as well. And so there is Al-Anon, there's Families Anonymous, there's Learn to Cope, there's many things out there. And nobody does this alone. People don't get clean and sober alone. The family won't get well alone. If you don't have some of those groups in your community, ask Hillary or myself or somebody in the room that can help you get the information on how to start one of those groups here so that there is the support for the family. You know, they say, you know, two sick people can't get anybody well. And so we all know that the addict creates a lot of collateral damage. So when you're in the throes of addiction in your household, it's very tough to make sound decisions because everything is a response to something else. And so seeking outside support is necessary for your own well-being and your own health, and it's important to do that. And the last thing that we did in South Boston that I think has been beneficial to a lot of families and to the providers and the service providers is we've formed two other kinds of groups. And one is support groups for families that lose somebody. And the second is some sort of group for providers, for the people that deal with this and see this day in and day out, so that they don't burn out and leave the field or get discouraged and think there is no hope, because we all know there is hope. So that's my take on substance abuse, what communities can do to bolster their fight against this disease in the community. And I wish you the best of luck. Oh, one last thing. It's called Zydro, Z-O-H-Y-D-R-O. It's coming to a pharmacy near you. The FDA approved it. It's 6 times stronger than OxyContin. It does not have the mechanism in it to make it so you can't crush it and cook it. Be careful. We're working with our federal legislators to try to put a stop to it, but they say it's going to be on the market in the next 2 weeks. Thank you.
So I'm sure many of you have all kinds of questions, and there are folks who are going to help with microphones so that your questions could be heard by everybody. But before we do that, can we hear our appreciation again for the panelists and what they brought? Thank you very much.
Hi, this is something that I didn't hear addressed, but I'm from Ware, Mass, and we have the same problem that every other area seems to have. But it's on the increase, and I was just in touch with the chief of police there, as well as the administration of the Parks and Rec Department. And one of the things they're running into is they're picking up needles everywhere. I mean hundreds of needles. And they do have the containers to put those needles in. However, they don't have a resource to get rid of them unless they come up with money to pay to have those needles recycled. And the budget in a small town like ours, and I'm sure many other small towns, can't afford to pay to return needles. So they're at a loss. So I got this call saying, do you have any suggestions? And the first thing I thought of was maybe like a CVS pharmacy, who seems to be with a partnership for a drug-free America, and I believe Walgreens, but Walgreens I think has turned them down. And so I'm wondering if any of you have any suggestions of what we do with all these needles without costing a whole lot of money.
Collaboration and cooperation. Go to a hospital. They'll take them and burn them with their...
Nope, the hospital turned us down. They said they would take them, but they were going to charge. We've already tried. The hospital was the first place they tried.
Both Winchester Hospital and Leahy Clinic take them for us, and they dispose of them with their hazardous material.
So, in other words, put pressure on the hospital and say that's ridiculous. You really need to take these. Okay.
I mean, the amount that we have a lot, and since needles have become, or syringes have become legal to purchase.
Yeah.
There's more of them, but we have a relationship, and it goes back to we do for them as they do for us, and they'll take anything we bring to them, either individually. We put them in soda bottles. If you're without a proper thing, we'll put it in a soda bottle, seal the soda bottle, and they'll destroy the whole thing for this in a red bag up at the emergency room. Same with Leahy Clinic's very supportive of us there as well.
So what you're saying is the best idea is to try and just put pressure on that hospital to do it with no fee.
Right. I mean, at our booking area, we have, like you're saying, a shops container, but that costs about $100 a container, and we send them a full one. They send us an empty one, and that's the pay for that we have within the station.
Well, the town has paid for 3 Sharps containers. We've got the Sharps containers. It's just that they're full. They're filling them
Where
up.
you buy them from? Most of them are recycled. Where you buy them from?
I'm not sure who he's buying them from. I know he owns them.
If you send them back to them, when you purchase it,
right,
you usually purchase for the disposal as well.
Okay. I'll let them know. Thank you.
With regard to that piece and those questions, Steve Bradley's here up front. He's one of the vice presidents at Bay State. See him right after and start putting that pressure on now.
Hello, thank you for coming. My name is Cheryl Dukes, and I'm a Buckland Selectman, and one of the things that I did not hear in terms of cooperation, collaboration, and communication is, do you work with your town boards of health? Because I'm just wondering, since most of us are from small rural communities, we have some, when you talk about community's been police and has been probation officers, and you folks are cities and larger, denser populations, and we're smaller. So I'm just wondering whether you all work with your boards of health, and if you do, what does that look like?
In this specific project, I mean, they're supportive of us. We have a single individual as the Board of Health, we're a health inspector, I guess, and then there's some other people that inspect the restaurants. We deal with them more in a blight. We have a blight task force that if we have a problem property or a nuisance property, we have the building commissioner, the Board of Health, the police department. Oftentimes we'll use that as a way to go after not the addicted user, but nuisance properties that they're dealing drugs and supplying drugs. In this particular venue, the Board of Health is not at the table, but they're very accessible to us and available to us. They're very cooperative. It's just they're burdened. They're burdened.
Hi, I don't have a question. I just wanted to mention that I've heard Learn to Cope brought up several times today, and I wanted everyone to know that there is a Learn to Cope chapter in Holyoke. We meet on Thursday evenings at Providence Hospital at 7 o'clock. It's a wonderful organization for anyone who's affected by addiction. It's a great place to start to deal with everything that you have to deal with. There's a 24/7 website that's open and available to anybody. You get lots of help, lots of resources, and lots of information. And go online, learn the number 2cope.org if you want further information. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, you know, I really appreciate the efforts of everybody here today. I've been troubled by the problem. I've been in and around the world of drugs for 45 years of my life, and I got clean about 7.5 years ago by miracle, and with a lot of help from a lot of people. It wasn't just one thing that did that for me. But I'm very, very troubled. I think it's wonderful that we're doing this at a local level, but being around that world for so many years, I'm very, very troubled by the fact that such powerful, cheap heroin is available on our streets compared to in the years past in my lifetime. I think we've done a horrible job at interdiction at our borders. I think there's been a terrible failure there. And, you know, the irony isn't lost on me that the last 12 years I've watched our brave soldiers walking through poppy fields in Afghanistan looking for our certifiable enemy, Al-Qaeda. And yet the poppies in those fields have killed more people in this country in the last 40 years than Al-Qaeda could ever hope to, you know?
Can I just talk a little bit of enforcement, if we could? It's one part I left out when I talked about what we did. The commitment to enforcement and interdiction, I read a lot of briefings, what happens in this area. The state police in this area and the local task forces are doing a phenomenal job stopping it once it gets here. The federal level interdiction getting into the country is an issue. I have an officer currently assigned to the Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force at a federal level. I have another officer assigned to a customs task force. Their sole mission is to deal with drug interdiction at the borders, at the high level. I participate in 2 different task forces where I have somebody assigned to the Drug Enforcement Administration and another one assigned to a Southern Middlesex Regional Drug Task Force. We're very committed in every area, not just here, to fight the battle. It's a big battle, and I can't say we're losing, I can't say we're winning, but we're giving it an awful big effort to make that happen. I understand what you're saying, I feel you. We went down 6 years ago to Philadelphia for a training session with the Drug Enforcement Administration, and we were at a briefing, a legitimate undercover briefing where they were doing an operation. And this guy that looked like Belka from Hill Street Blues, if anybody can think back that far, was a legitimate undercover officer. And he sat there talking to us, and he had this ball cap pulled down, and he said, "Hey, you guys, anybody from Lynn? Because I'm bringing 6 kilos of heroin up to Lynn tonight." But I mean, they're fighting that battle, and it was an undercover operation. I don't know how to stop it, you know, other than the fact I'll give it everything I have. And I know that in this area, the interdiction is phenomenal. If you look in the paper, over the weekend, I've heard they had another one. They grabbed 5 kilograms last week. They're doing this Route 91 thing, and they're killing it. They're doing a great job out here. The big picture getting into the country, a little above my pay grade.
I'd also like to add, I'm sorry, Mike. I'd also like to add that John Merrigan called me on a Thursday afternoon. He said, "Hey, I got this buddy coming by to see you in about an hour or so, District Attorney David Sullivan." And he showed up at my desk, and I thought it was going to be about a 10-minute meet and greet. He was there for 2 hours. And when you have commitment like that, you're gonna be successful in your efforts. Once again, it's going to be present. You got to control it. But once again, be comforted by the fact that you have you have an entire roundtable of everybody here today, and District Attorney Sullivan is committed to that as well.
You can also, we've left out because we didn't think it was for us to bring up, but we have a very good working relationship with the DEA all over. We've been to parts of this country where heroin and oxys are high, and we've gone right down into the trenches with them about situations. So I strongly suggest who your SAC, whatever the word is here, you have district attorneys sit in this room who've probably done work with them on the federal level. Is there a federal court in this area? So you know that if you talk to the SAC agent, the DEA agent in charge, he'll be willing to help you out, as we have two of them that help us out on a consistent basis, and especially with the 91 corridor. Heroin follows highways, there's no doubt about it. You got highways, you got heroin.
We're going to go over here and then over here. Yes.
Oh, here first. I wasn't quite ready. Hi, I'm a substance abuse, opioid dependence treatment provider here in Greenfield, and I wanted to thank, just two things to say in one question. Thank you for talking about it being a chronic illness, because it's like diabetes. Some people need treatment lifelong. Some people will get off of treatment. The other thing I wanted to thank is the court system for giving people the wake-up call, because a lot of people come to treatment because they've had some interaction with the court system, and there's going to be consequences more than, it's hard to say more than their death. Like, they don't really see the mortality piece as much as they see the pending jail or losing their children or can they get their kids back. It's very effective, I think. I want to make sure people know that there's this Clean Slate Center in Greenfield, and that's where I do a little bit of work. And I wanted to know from I don't know if there's any police here in Greenfield, but the court system in Greenfield, have you seen changes from, opioid replacement treatment in what's happening out there in this, in the sort of legal world? And what are your attitudes about opioid replacement? This might be a question for the judge, I'm not sure. Chief Haig.
He said, the judge said he'll address that right after. Chief, you got that?
I'll defer to the judge.
That's a smart chief.
Very smart.
So the judge said he'll speak to you right after. So I know there was another hand over there. Another question.
Hi, mine is more of a comment and maybe a challenge to all the providers that are here. I have a long story. I'll keep it very short, but I am a survivor. I lost a granddaughter on the end of a needle a year and a half ago, or 14 months ago. And I guess my challenge is for myself and my partner. When we went through this horrific loss, there was nobody out there to help us. And I guess so my challenge is, if some of you could step up to that challenge, and I know that we've had 9 deaths in the last number of months, and I had another mom here just today. It's extremely hard for us to be here, and she came up, she had to leave. We gave a hug, we exchanged phone numbers so that we can get together. There's nobody out there doing a group for us. I have grandchildren, other grandchildren. There's nobody out there helping them. When I say nobody, I mean, yes, they have a therapist and stuff, but there's nobody out there doing an adolescent group for survivors that have lost. And, I work in the mental health field. I could start one. I don't have the energy. I want somebody else to do it. So that's my challenge to all you awesome people out there. Give us a group.
I would talk to the woman in the background from Learn to Cope. That's what they do, and they do it extremely well. You talk to her, she'd be willing, I'd say willing to help you. And also that get the people to form a group in this area, but the people that work at Learn to Cope are amazing, amazing people. They'll put you at ease, and they're very successful at what they do, and they're relentless. So that's what I'd suggest to you.
There's also a support group called GRASP. It's Grieving After Significant Passing. Yeah. Okay. Once again, maybe a collaborative effort in speaking to GRASP and getting some other people that are interested in once again, getting combined energy to work on it.
Question here.
Good afternoon. My name is Tim Ranny Blake, and I'm, like a lot of us, we all have a very long story that got us in this room today. But what I wanted to do was talk about a group that I know that's under the aegis of the organization called the Consortium, and it's the Recover Project. What we at the Recover Project do for each other is provide community. We provide safe, sober community. We don't provide clinical services. We don't provide detox or anything like that. All we do is provide our own company with each other. So therefore, anyone who walks in the door is already connected in all kinds of ways. And one of the ways that I would like to bring some awareness about what's going on here in Franklin County, we've heard a little bit about communities coming together. What I want to do is talk about 20 years ago now, I used to do HIV and sexuality education. And I know that some of the group of the Recovery Project went to a local high school and asked the children, the young people, if they knew anyone who had a drug problem, and almost every single hand in the room went up. My issue is that I remember when I was talking to 10th graders, two questions and a statement came to me, and I know how things can move in generations and in communities. I was talking about sexuality issues and birth control and that kind of thing, and the first question was, does Mountain Dew lower your sperm count? The second question was, why did you wait until after we're sexually active to come and tell us this stuff? This is 10th grade. And if you want to get something done, you need to be down the street at the middle school. So we have an opportunity here in Franklin County in lots of ways. We've got an opportunity that I'm thinking is going to be positive, and we don't have a lot of that good structure, so we can build it from the ground up. And so I would invite anyone to come to the Recover Project, 68 Federal Street. Yes, I'm bragging. Yes, I'm doing some, because the Gavin Center has opened up another Recover Center, and we provide community for each other, and that's the key. And we are trying our best to be there for elderly people, for veterans, for young people, for single women, for everybody who needs help with this issue of recovery, no matter which way it goes. And so every door is open when you walk into the Recover Project.
Thank you very much. Last question over here, and then Congressman McGovern will close out the afternoon.
Hi, my name is Jolene, and I work for Head Start, which is an anti-poverty preschool program. And one of my jobs, I'm a family advocate, so I do home visits. And I went to a home visit recently, and I was given this, and I didn't know how to respond to it. It's a pen, and it looks just like a needle. It encourages kids to push buttons. And I know that knowledge is power, awareness is good, but what happens when it's something like, where there's a lot of controversy? It says on it, say no to drugs. Not too many 3 or 4-year-olds would be able to read that, and if they find a needle on the side of the road and they're used to seeing something like this, they're gonna try to touch it. So I understand the meaning behind it, but what do you tell a parent who may have an addiction problem that this was given to an older child? In first grade, they were given this. So I didn't know what to say. So I guess now that there's an epidemic, that's really...
Where did it come from? Where did they get it?
Huh?
Where did they get it?
Public school.
We give out little teddy bear pens and stuff like that in Woburn. I'd start with the school. I mean, they probably was good-natured. We get catalogs this many a week trying to sell you this stuff. That was a novel idea, somebody to make them different. I'd go to the school for giving it out and ask them please not to do it. I mean, that's where I'd start. And if you want me to do it for you, I'll do it for you.
That would be nice. Thank you.
Bob, could I just mention one thing?
Yes.
Since we're talking about prevention, on April 26th, you all know it's National Drug Take Back Day. We'll be holding it in Franklin and Hampshire counties. There's a table out there with plenty of brochures that tell you where to drop your drugs. Also, District Attorney Sullivan has partnered with many people across both counties and the Bureau of Substance Abuse to put kiosks in 16 police departments in our jurisdiction. So again, there's cards out there. Take them, drop your drugs, drop your parents' drugs, and get rid of them. Thank you.
Hey, I just want to add something to what you just said, if I could. One thing, we didn't want to say too much. We didn't want to try to overburden the situation, but how many people here are in the real estate business? How many people here sell a house or want to sell their house? When you have an open house, please, please hide your medicine, because that is one of the ways they go right in an open house. One distracts the other's in the room. They'll rip you off. They'll steal your drugs. They'll steal your jewelry. So if you're in that situation, pay attention to it.
Let's thank our colleagues and friends from the East. When redistricting happened here in Western Mass, we certainly hit the jackpot. Congressman McGovern is as good a fit as was Congressman Olver. When one thinks about courage, heart, and intelligence, one must think of our Congressman. Congressman McGovern has stood up for those things that are meaningful to him and meaningful to us. When he gets his picture taken in jail, it's not, when he goes to jail, it's not so he can get his picture taken with a Hollywood star. When he stands up for hardworking people who don't have enough to eat, and he walks from Northampton into Franklin County, it's not for the joy of walking around with Monty. And when he stands up for and has the courage to compromise at the federal level, he's setting a new path for the future of what democracy has to look like. So please welcome our Congressman George McGovern. Jim McGovern.
Well, first of all, let me thank President Pura for the introduction and for hosting us here at this incredible school. I love coming here. There's so many important issues that are discussed here, and all the people here, the students and faculty, are engaged in every issue in our community at every level, and so it's a joy to be here. I also want to begin by thanking John Merrigan. Vinnie Pirro said he's a pit bull. I think that's a good description of John Merrigan. Never gives up and is constantly in your face until a problem is solved. I think the same goes for Chris Donlin and Dave Sullivan. And I want to thank them for forming the Opiate Education and Awareness Task Force. And what you and this community have been able to accomplish in a very short time, I think, is really quite incredible. I also want to thank the elected officials that are here. I mean, Senator Rosenberg, Representative Mark, and Andrews and Kulik. You elect good people here. They're here for almost this entire day listening to these panels because they, like me, want to learn. And when I was asked to kind of close this, I was a little bit puzzled because, quite frankly, I don't think people on the federal level quite get it. And if I were to characterize the federal war on drugs, I would say it's largely a failure. It is focused almost exclusively on punitive measures, incarceration, sloganeering, you know, and kind of a drug war where we fumigate fields of illicit drugs halfway around the world, expecting that that will solve all of our problems here, when we know that demand is what fuels this illegal drug trade, and we need to deal with that head on. You know, before I had prepared remarks here, but they don't seem adequate in lieu of some of the things that the panels have said here. I want to say to you that I've had many friends, close friends. I have many friends, close friends who struggle with opiate and heroin addictions. and other substance abuse addictions. And it is painful to watch. And I've seen it rip apart families. I've seen people who love them very much give up out of frustration. It's not always easy to figure out a way to help. And quite frankly, there's not one way to do it. John McGahn said that there are multiple ways that people deal with this issue and that are effective. And I think that's an accurate statement. There's not a silver bullet here. There's not one answer to this challenge. There are multiple solutions to this. And I've also had many friends, I've had too many friends, who I've gone to high school with and who I've gone to college with and who I've gotten to know working on Capitol Hill, who have died from their addictions. And that's painful. You know, people I've admired very much, people I've respected, people I've cared deeply about and loved have died. And going to a funeral, going to their funerals in particular, I couldn't help but be frustrated about the fact that their life ended so soon, when they had so much to give and so much to offer. You know, whether they be a mother of 2 young children or a 60-year-old man who still had a lot more to give, they succumbed to this disease. And I think it is a disease. I think we need to make sure we talk about it as a healthcare issue. This is like diabetes. It's like cancer. People get these diseases. And when someone gets diabetes or cancer, we treat it. And that's what we need to do here. We need to make sure that we have the treatment necessary so that people get the help that they need. You know, I'm sure earlier today people talked about Philip Seymour Hoffman. All of a sudden everybody's talking about this issue nationally and internationally because a well-known celebrity who was wealthy and had the whole world in front of him kind of demonstrated that addiction has no boundaries. I mean, it impacts people who are poor, it impacts people who are in the middle class, it impacts people who are very, very wealthy. This disease doesn't pick on one group in particular. And, you know, and part of the challenge, you know, that I kind of deal with is trying to figure out how best to respond. I have 2 kids. I have a 15-year-old son and a 12-year-old daughter going on 30. And I worry about them. I know that some of their friends take drugs, and I try to communicate with them in a way that I hope doesn't go in one ear and out the other. It's tough for someone my age to go before a school group and be able to talk about this issue and be effective. Sometimes it's tough for parents to be effective with their own kids. I think we need to realize that and make sure that as we enter into this kind of education phase, that we're putting the right messenger in the room to deliver the right message. And it may not always be the usual suspects. And we need to be thinking out of the box in those terms. And I think that, thankfully, you know, many of the people in this room, you know, have recognized that that this takes multiple forms, and that we need to be open-minded, and we need to be thinking out of the box. You know, as a nation, we have historically conducted the war on drugs through the criminal justice system. You know, we have jail on demand, but not treatment on demand. And the fact of the matter is, we need treatment on demand. When somebody comes forward and says that they need help or are willing to have help today, they need that help today. Next week, they may not want that help. Tomorrow may be too late. We need to make sure that we have the facilities, not just in prison, but outside of prison, to make sure that people get the help that they need, knowing that this is a lifelong struggle. You know, and I will tell you that politicians like to get up and talk about treatment on demand, and a lot of people, you know, in crowds like this talk about treatment on demand, but then it gets a little bit difficult when we talk about where the treatment facilities are located, and where some of these halfway houses are going to be located. And then we get into these battles over not in my backyard, and not, I don't want this here, I don't want this here. The fact of the matter is we need to overcome that, and as a community come together and make a commitment to making sure that the facilities that people need are there. If not, then we're just kind of talking past each other. You know, we know that prevention works, but when it doesn't work, we need to make sure that people get what they need. You know, I want to mention the Franklin County Communities That Care Coalition in particular, who I've talked with on a number of occasions. And I think they've demonstrated that prevention efforts driven by the community can produce extraordinary results. And I think this task force that you're all here supporting is kind of following that model. You know, I think every effort must be made to ensure that treatment is available to all those who want it when they want it. Because you all know it takes courage. And I've known this from friends. When someone comes forward and says, I really need help, it takes a lot of courage for that person. It takes guts for them to come forward. And we need to make sure we're there, plugging them into the services that they need. I want to thank the health professionals in this room and those at Bay State Health who have committed to exploring the availability of treatment options. I think that's an important step. You know, oftentimes our first responders are the ones first on the scene of an overdose. They must be equipped with the tools necessary to save the life of any individual they encounter. So must those who work in substance abuse facilities. So must parents. So must those who are working with those who are struggling with substance abuse and addiction. And in the case of an opiate overdose, the availability of a reversal medication such as Narcan could save a life. And I know that DPH and Hillary Jacobs, I mean, they're exploring projects here. But I think, and again, I'm not an expert here, but my advice would be to expand the availability of this drug so we can save more lives. You know, it's important. I recently discussed opiate addiction awareness and prevention and treatment with the Massachusetts District Attorneys. Dave Sullivan was down in Washington. And at the federal level, the Department of Justice Harold Rogers Prescription Drug Monitoring Program is offering grant funding to support local collaborative efforts, such as this one, you know, to pilot innovative ways to use data to inform prevention, treatment, and enforcement efforts. So we, you know, to the extent the federal government could be helpful with some funds that might be more difficult to come by at a local or state level, we need to be there to make sure that those funds are coming to these communities like this one that are getting their act together. You know, I'm relatively new to this part of the state. I've represented Worcester all the way down to Fall River for many years, and we've dealt with some of these issues, sometimes successfully, sometimes unsuccessfully. Senator Markey is down in southeastern Massachusetts. I think the Mayor Greenfield is with him as well, talking about the very same things that we're talking about here today. But I have this sense that in this community, I think you're kind of ahead of the game. And that gives me great encouragement that we're going to actually get some results here. I think, you know, combating addiction is not easy and it's not local. You know, you heard before that wherever there's a highway, you're going to find heroin. Well, the fact of the matter is that our neighbors to the north in Vermont are facing similar challenges. The governor of Vermont dedicated his entire State of the State address to this issue. And I've been talking with Bernie Sanders and Pat Leahy and Representative Welsh, trying to figure out ways that we can work together across state lines to make sure that we're getting this problem under control. And let me just close with this. I don't have all the answers here, and I think my response to this problem is you got to do whatever works. And sometimes it's not one thing, sometimes it's many things. And you've heard lots of kind of success stories here of ways that communities have been able to combat this problem. I think we need to adopt every single successful practice and put it to work in this community. And as I said, I'm new here. But the one thing I really value about being here is that, you know, and with all due respect to my friends from Woburn, people here, I think, are forward thinkers. There's an activism here. There's a commitment to community. There's a commitment to one another that is really unique here. I've seen it in 1,000 different actions. You know, I've been to places where entire movements are formed to feed and clothe people who need those things. It was mentioned before by President Pure. I mean, I walked 26 miles with Monty Belmonte I was a radio personality out here to raise money for the Western Mass Food Bank. And what was so incredible to me was all the people in this community that came forward and stopped on the road and handed money. And, raise all kinds of funds to help make sure that no one goes hungry. People here are dedicated to eliminating this growing epidemic. And I think the takeaway from this meeting today is that we have the talent in this room. People who have survived substance abuse and addiction, people who are healthcare providers, people who are in law enforcement. We have all the talent in this room to solve this problem. And my goal is to help you become a model for the rest of the state and for the rest of this country. I believe we're going to win this battle. And I want you to succeed, because I want your efforts to be a guide for the federal government so that we can take some of these resources that we're dumping overseas and start directing them back here to helping the people who need the help the most, to support the efforts that all of you are undertaking. So I think if anyone could do it, it's this community. And so I wish you all the best, and consider me a partner in this battle. Thank you very much.
Look around the world and see our families dying. Doesn't seem to matter all the things we're trying. Another needle in the arm is just a message. Another day is coming and it's time for healing.